"Don't get on, the helicopter is going to explode," shouted the cleaning lady's daughter as she jumped into the millionaire's arms. He thought it was a joke, but when she explained the reason, his heart raced. The morning sun rose over downtown Chicago, casting long golden shadows across the skyline. At the top of the Carter Sky headquarters, a towering glass monolith overlooking Lake Michigan, helicopters gleamed under the early light like metallic birds poised to take flight. The building, home to one of the largest private aviation companies in the country, buzzed with quiet efficiency. Employees in tailored suits sipped coffee, screens blinked in silent command centers, and high-level meetings had already begun. On the rooftop heliport, final checks were underway for a scheduled departure. The flight was meant to take William Carter, the company's founder and CEO, to Denver for a major investor meeting. To most at Carter Sky, this was just another routine day. But not for Emily Rivera. 19-year-old Emily stood by the service elevator, clutching a tote bag awkwardly as she stepped out onto the executive floor. Her sneakers squeaked on the polished marble tiles. Despite the opulence around her, sleek chrome finishes, muted luxury furniture, and the constant murmur of important conversations, she was there for something far more ordinary, to visit her mother, Rosa Rivera, who had cleaned these offices faithfully for over a decade. Emily wasn't supposed to be on that floor. Her visits were usually brief and limited to the service wing. But Rosa had left her lunch at home, and Emily had brought it after her morning class at the community college. She had always been curious about Carter Sky's operations. The endless hallways and occasional glimpses of high-tech aviation equipment fascinated her. She never imagined she would step into the heart of the action. As she waited for her mother near the hallway that led to the rooftop helipad, Emily's eyes wandered. The giant windows offered a panoramic view of the city. Across the glass, she could see the rotors of the helicopter starting their slow, intimidating spin. Her gaze moved instinctively toward the aircraft. Something about it caught her attention. Near the landing skids, a man in a gray uniform moved with unusual speed. He was crouched low, partially hidden by the fuselage. Emily squinted, leaning closer to the glass. His movements weren't like the other techs she had occasionally seen during her visits. He kept glancing around, nervous. Then, he reached into a panel beneath the aircraft, fumbled with a tool, and inserted something that didn't quite look right. A flash of exposed wiring followed by a faint metallic click. He didn't seem to test anything or run any diagnostics, he just adjusted, shut the panel, and walked away with his head down. Emily's breath caught. She didn't know much about helicopters, but she had a childhood obsession with machines. While other girls played with dolls, she had spent hours with her father building model planes. After he passed away when she was 12, her interest in aviation faded but never fully disappeared. Something about the way that man handled the machine, hurried, careless, almost secretive, stirred a deep unease inside her. By the time Rosa came out of the janitor's lounge and spotted her daughter, Emily was already walking toward the emergency stairwell that led to the roof. Rosa called out, but Emily didn't respond. She didn't know what she would say or do, only that she had to get to the helipad before that helicopter lifted off. Meanwhile, on the rooftop, William Carter adjusted the cuffs of his tailored jacket as the wind from the spinning rotors whipped at his hair. At 57 years old, William had built Carter Sky from the ground up, transforming it from a mid-size regional charter company into a global powerhouse in private and corporate aviation. He had a reputation for precision, confidence, and an intolerance for inefficiency. His chopper was scheduled to take off at exactly 8:30 in the morning, and he hated delays. His assistant handed him the itinerary for Denver, but William barely glanced at it. His mind was already 10 steps ahead: strategic partnerships, expansion plans, a potential acquisition in Europe. His pilot, already seated inside the aircraft, gave him a thumbs up through the cockpit glass. William took a deep breath and stepped forward. That was when the rooftop access door burst open. Emily Rivera, hair flying, eyes wide with urgency, sprinted across the rooftop, shouting at the top of her lungs. Her voice was nearly drowned by the roar of the blades, but her words pierced through the noise like a siren. "Don't get on. The helicopter is going to explode." For a split second, Everything froze. William turned sharply, startled, as security officers on the perimeter lunged into motion. But before anyone could reach her, Emily hurled herself toward William, grabbing his arm. Her face was pale, her breath coming in gasps. William instinctively caught her, more out of surprise than concern. Around them, chaos broke out. The pilot shut down the engine. Security closed in. William's assistant shouted into a walkie-talkie. But all William could do was stare at the trembling girl in his arms. He blinked, incredulous. "What did you just say?" She looked up at him, desperate. "I'm not crazy. Please, just listen. Something's wrong with that helicopter." And for the first time in his life, William Carter hesitated before boarding his own aircraft. The helipad, normally a place of rigid protocol and quiet efficiency, had turned into a theater of confusion. Security agents circled William Carter and the girl now clutching his arm. The helicopter's blades slowed to a crawl, casting long, uneven shadows across the rooftop as the rotors came to a full stop. Wind whipped through everyone's hair and suits, but not a single person moved until William raised his hand and said, "Let her speak." Emily Rivera stood slightly behind him now, shoulders tense, chest heaving from the sprint and adrenaline. Her eyes darted between the silent helicopter and the ring of security guards approaching them like cautious wolves. William could feel the tremor in her hand as he released her arm. He studied her, confused, wary, but, most of all, curious. Her fear was too real to be an act. "What exactly did you see?" he asked, voice calm but edged with command. Emily glanced at the helicopter again, struggling to put her observations into words. "There was a man," she began. "He wasn't one of your team. He was wearing a gray jumpsuit, like the others, but he didn't move like them. He didn't run any checks. He just went under the fuselage, opened a panel, and he put something in. Then closed it and left like he didn't want anyone to see." One of the security officers stepped closer. "Sir, we need to escort her off the premises until this is verified." William ignored him. "You're saying someone sabotaged my aircraft?" Emily swallowed hard. "I don't know exactly what he did. But something looked wrong. I've seen your team work. They test things. He didn't. He rushed it. And I saw sparks. A loose wire, maybe. I just had a bad feeling." The wind died down as the blades came to a full stop. William stared at the helicopter. For a moment, a thought flickered. Was this an elaborate prank? A media stunt? An attention-seeking move? But the girl didn't seem unstable or theatrical. There was no camera crew, no signs of fabrication. Just raw, shaking urgency. A new voice emerged from the stairwell, Morris, the chief of Carter Sky's on-site aviation mechanics. A seasoned man with 2 decades of aircraft experience and zero tolerance for nonsense. "What's going on up here?" he barked, taking off his goggles. His eyes settled on Emily, then shifted to William. "I need a full systems check," William ordered, nodding at the helicopter. "Top to bottom. Right now. Shut everything else down. No other flights until we clear this." Morris looked surprised but didn't argue. He snapped his fingers at 2 mechanics already on standby. They stepped forward and began working, prying open panels, running diagnostics. One of them quickly retrieved a portable scanner. The rooftop crowd waited in tense silence. Meanwhile, William motioned for his assistant, Karen, to approach. She leaned in. "Find out who this girl is. Immediately." Karen nodded and stepped aside, pulling out her phone. Emily stood still, arms crossed now, retreating slightly into herself as the moments dragged. She had no idea whether she'd done the right thing. What if she had misunderstood? What if she'd just made a complete fool of herself in front of one of the most powerful men in America? But that man, William Carter, hadn't dismissed her, and that alone kept her on her feet. 10 minutes later, Morris emerged from beneath the aircraft with a grim expression. His gloved hands held a component removed from the underside of the helicopter. "This isn't ours," he said flatly. "This part was switched out." William walked over, peered at the device. It looked ordinary enough, a circuit module the size of a paperback book. But Morris pointed out a detail along the casing. "Cheap knockoff. Doesn't even match our system specs. If it had shorted mid-air, it would have overridden the ignition protocol. Probably triggered a failure in one of the pressure valves. At altitude? The thing could have gone up like a matchbox." The silence on the helipad was now different, heavier, electric. Karen reappeared beside William. "Sir," she said quietly, "the girl's name is Emily Rivera. Her mother is Rosa Rivera. She works janitorial. Has been with us since 2010. Emily has clearance to visit during non-peak hours, though only in designated areas." William turned slowly toward Emily. Her arms were still crossed, but she was looking directly at him now. No longer timid, just alert. "You're not a technician," he said, his tone flat but not unkind. "No," she replied. I notice things." "Why were you even near the helipad?" "I wasn't supposed to be. But I saw something from the hallway window. I followed a gut feeling." William studied her for a long moment, then turned to Morris. "I want the flight logs. Maintenance schedules. Access control for the last 24 hours. If someone planted this, I want to know how they got close to my helicopter without tripping every damn alarm in this building." Morris nodded and strode back toward the stairwell, barking commands into his radio. "Ms. Rivera," William said, addressing Emily again. "You saved my life. I don't know how, or why, but that's what happened." Emily opened her mouth, unsure what to say, but he raised a hand. "You're coming with me. Not under arrest. Not for questioning. But you're staying close. I want to know everything you saw. Everything you remember. Because if someone just tried to kill me, and you stopped it, you're now part of something very serious." Rosa Rivera arrived on the rooftop seconds later, out of breath, having taken the service stairs. Her eyes widened when she saw Emily standing beside William Carter, surrounded by security. She pushed through the guards, gripping her daughter's arm. "What happened? What did you do?" "I think she might have saved your boss's life," one of the younger mechanics said under his breath. William nodded to Karen. "Arrange a secure room downstairs. Get Rosa some water. I want both of them comfortable. Then bring in the head of security." Emily didn't speak again as they were led back into the building. The doors closed behind them with a soft mechanical hiss, cutting off the noise of the rooftop. In the executive elevator, silence reigned. Rosa held her daughter's hand. William watched the descending numbers, deep in thought. His instincts, sharpened over decades of business warfare and hostile acquisitions, were now fully engaged. Someone wanted him dead. But they hadn't counted on a janitor's daughter with a sharp eye and enough nerve to tackle him at the last second. That, William thought grimly, was their first mistake. And now, the real questions would begin. Down in a high-security conference room 2 floors below the executive offices, a group had gathered in tense silence. The glass walls were now frosted for privacy. A pot of untouched coffee sat cooling on the side table. William Carter stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, his sharp gaze fixed on a large monitor where the access logs were being reviewed by the head of security, Marcus Dre. Marcus, a stocky man with years of military intelligence experience, clicked through the footage from earlier that morning. The footage was clean, too clean. "This is the East Corridor, 5 minutes before your flight prep began," he said. "This should be the path for all authorized personnel moving toward the helipad." "Who accessed the area?" William asked, not looking away from the screen. "Only 3 names registered in the logs, Chief Technician Rollins, Junior Tech Harris, and Pilot McCoy," Marcus replied. "And all 3 identities matched their assigned movements." William narrowed his eyes. Then how did an unauthorized man in a gray jumpsuit with an outdated badge get near my aircraft without triggering anything? That's the problem, Marcus said, rubbing his temple. There's no anomaly in the logs. Emily, seated quietly at the end of the table, had been watching the footage closely. Her mother, Rosa, sat beside her, fidgeting nervously. Emily hadn't said much since being escorted downstairs, but now she leaned forward. "Can you rewind?" she asked. Marcus hesitated, then complied. "Pause," Emily said. "Right there." The screen froze on a frame showing a mechanic entering the corridor. He was mid-step, his face partially turned away. His ID badge dangled against his chest. "That's not Rollins," Emily said with certainty. "That's the man I saw near the helicopter." Rosa turned to her, surprised. "How can you tell from that angle?" "His gait," Emily replied. "He has a limp. The man I saw had the same limp. Rollins didn't have it. I passed by him last week when he was fixing a leak in the basement hangar." William raised an eyebrow, impressed by the level of detail she remembered. Marcus played the footage forward again. As the figure walked past a camera, his face turned briefly toward the lens, only for a split second. Marcus froze the image and enhanced it. The man wasn't Rollins. "Who the hell is that?" William asked, voice low and cold. Marcus checked a secondary terminal. Badge number scanned at the entrance matches Rollins. But the face doesn't. Someone used a cloned badge. William turned to Karen, who stood nearby with a digital notepad. "Get me Rollins. In person. I want him here in 10 minutes." While she left to carry out the order, Emily turned toward Marcus. "Why didn't the system flag the mismatch?" "It should have," he admitted. "Our system uses facial recognition in parallel with badge access. Which means someone either disabled the secondary verification, or bypassed it." Emily frowned. "Wouldn't that trigger a security alert?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes. Which means the alert was cleared manually before it reached command." William said nothing for a long moment, then looked at Emily. "You noticed something we all missed. You weren't even supposed to be there. But you saw it." "I wasn't trying to interfere," she said, uncertain whether his tone was appreciative or accusatory. "You interfered exactly when you needed to," William replied, then glanced at Marcus. "Start combing through the system logs. I want timestamps on every alert generated in the last 12 hours. And check who had override access during that period." Marcus moved quickly. Karen returned a moment later with a tall, broad-shouldered man in a Carter Sky uniform. His face was pale, his movements uncertain. "Sir, this is Rollins," she said. William didn't move. "Do you recognize the man in the footage?" Rollins stepped forward, peered at the monitor, then stiffened. "That's not me." "Your badge was used to access the East Corridor," Marcus said. "I lost it 3 days ago," Rollins replied. "I filed a report with HR. I've been using a temporary visitor's pass until the new one arrives." Karen checked her tablet. "Confirmed." He reported the badge as lost. William turned back to Marcus. "Then we have an imposter with cloned access and someone on the inside covering his movements." Marcus's face darkened. "I'll widen the investigation." Rosa finally spoke, timidly. "Mr. Carter, is it safe for my daughter to stay involved in this?" William turned to her, his tone unexpectedly soft. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Rivera. But your daughter may have saved my life today. That makes her more than a bystander." Rosa glanced at Emily, unsure how to respond. William continued, now addressing Emily directly. "You said the part installed on the helicopter looked different. Can you be more specific?" Emily hesitated, then spoke with growing confidence. "It didn't have the same seal markings. The Carter Sky parts I've seen during visits always have a serial code printed near the edge. This one didn't. Also, the wire colors were slightly off, more faded, like it had been stored somewhere humid." Marcus whistled softly. That's incredibly specific. I used to build model engines with my dad, she said. I pay attention to details. William gave her a long look. What was his name? Luis Rivera. William blinked. He worked here. Years ago. Emily's face tensed. I know. He was fired when I was 12. My mom never talked about it much. The room fell into a brief silence. I remember, William said eventually. He worked in inventory logistics. Quiet guy. Yeah, Emily whispered. He was quiet. He also died in a traffic accident 2 months after leaving the company. William didn't reply. Marcus broke the silence. Sir, I pulled something from the system. There was an alert at 7:13 this morning, facial recognition failure at checkpoint 6. That's near the East Corridor, Karen added quickly. The alert was cleared manually by user credentials assigned to Director Lang. William's face hardened. Lang, he said. Director of Technical Operations, Marcus confirmed. Bring him in. Now. When Director Lang walked into the room, there was no trace of the usual casual professionalism that typically accompanied his presence. His tie was slightly crooked, the collar of his shirt damp with sweat. The man was in his early 60s, a Carter Sky veteran who had been with the company since its early expansions into international charter operations. He had a reputation for discipline, loyalty, and an unforgiving attention to detail. But none of that seemed to matter now. William Carter, standing with arms folded and jaw clenched, gave no greeting. Marcus, the head of security, motioned Lang toward the large monitor still displaying the frozen image of the unknown technician, the man who had tampered with the helicopter. Lang squinted. What's this about? You tell us, William said coldly. This man accessed the East Corridor this morning using a cloned badge. He replaced a critical component on my helicopter. It was sabotage. And the alert generated by the system when he failed facial recognition, it was cleared using your credentials. Lang's eyebrows jumped, but he didn't look surprised, just cornered. That's impossible. I wasn't even logged into the system this morning. I was in my office reviewing engine prototypes. You can ask my assistant. I'm not asking for alibis, William replied. I want to know how your credentials were used. You're the only one in the company with override clearance for security alerts in restricted zones. Lang shifted his stance slightly. Then someone must have accessed my terminal remotely. Or cloned my login. Marcus approached, holding a printed access report. The override wasn't remote. It came directly from your terminal at 7:13 this morning. From your private office. Your fingerprint was used to initiate the override protocol. Lang's face paled. That's not possible, he said again, his voice thinner now. William stepped closer. Do not insult me, Lang. We are talking about an attempted assassination. You either helped someone do it, or you've been compromised. Which is it? Lang opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Emily, still seated with Rosa at the side of the room, watched in stunned silence. It was surreal, to see someone who looked like he belonged on magazine covers and business roundtables interrogating a man as if this were a criminal courtroom. Her mother squeezed her hand tightly under the table. I'm not involved in this, Lang finally said, louder than necessary. I've given everything to this company. You know that, William? William studied him for several long seconds. I gave you trust. That trust has just been shattered. Effective immediately, you are suspended from all duties. Marcus, escort him to Security Suite 3. Lock his access. I want his terminals, phone logs, and server history analyzed. Lang stood motionless for a moment, then turned toward Marcus, who approached with 2 guards. As they led him out of the room, Lang looked back once, not at William, but at Emily. His expression lingered too long to be casual. Emily felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. After the door closed behind them, silence returned. Karen moved closer to William and whispered, "We've never had a breach like this." Someone knew exactly which systems to bypass, and who had access. This wasn't spontaneous. "No," William said. "It was surgical." He turned back toward Emily. "Did you see Lang on the rooftop this morning?" She shook her head. "No. I only saw the fake technician." He nodded. "Still, you've given us a timeline. That's more than we had an hour ago." Emily wanted to ask something, but held it. William didn't miss her hesitation. "Say it," he said. "It's just," she hesitated. "When Lang looked at me on his way out, it didn't feel like surprise. Or confusion. It felt like recognition." Karen's brow furrowed. "You've never met him before?" "Not formally," Emily said. "I might have seen him in the halls. But I never talked to him. My mom worked nights when I was younger, so I was sometimes here after school. He never acknowledged us." William looked at Rosa, who nodded. "He never even said good evening." Marcus returned minutes later, carrying a silver case containing the tampered part removed from the helicopter. "The preliminary analysis is done," he announced. "Our engineers confirmed this isn't just a counterfeit. It's been modified." "How?" William asked. Marcus opened the case, revealing the part nestled in foam. He pointed to a cluster of wiring connections. "There's a microsequencer here that doesn't belong. It's custom installed. When the system hits operational altitude, it trips the ignition regulator. That triggers an electrical loopback and causes a cascade in the fuel pump system. Best guess, explosion after 3 minutes in air." Karen covered her mouth. William leaned in. "It's not just sabotage. It's murder with precision. Whoever built this knew our aircraft inside and out." Emily stared at the part. "Can we trace it? Like, find out where it was built?" Marcus nodded. "Already working on it. It's custom work, so there's a good chance it'll link to a specific black market supplier. Especially one dealing with aircraft components." William turned toward the wall of windows behind him. The skyline of Chicago stood quiet in the distance. But in his mind, the ground was no longer stable. This wasn't just about a disgruntled former employee or an act of terrorism. Someone had targeted him. And someone inside the company had helped them do it. He turned back. "Karen, I want NDAs from everyone in this room. Effective now. Nothing leaves this floor." She nodded and stepped out to coordinate. "Marcus," William continued, "I want facial recognition scans run through national and international criminal databases. I want to know who our fake technician is." "And the part?" Marcus asked. "Store it. Chain of custody. Evidence now." After the room cleared a little, William approached Emily and Rosa. "I'm sorry you had to be dragged into this," he said quietly. "But what you did today, most people wouldn't have had the courage. You trusted your instincts. You saved lives." Emily said nothing for a moment, then asked, "Do you think this has anything to do with my dad?" That stopped him cold. He studied her. "Why do you ask?" "I don't know," she said. "Just a feeling. He worked here. He was let go. Then, this. Lang's face when he looked at me, it made me wonder." William exhaled slowly. Luis Rivera was not fired for anything serious, if that's what you're thinking. There was a project freeze. Lots of departments lost people. Logistics was downsized, and he was a casualty of that shift. Emily looked unconvinced. "If I'm wrong," William added, "I'll find out." Then he surprised her. "I want you to stay under company protection for now. I'll arrange a safe location for you and your mother. Just until this is over." Rosa looked alarmed. "Is that really necessary?" William didn't sugarcoat. If someone inside Carter Sky helped orchestrate this, and Emily is the reason it failed, she might not be safe anymore. Emily looked out the frosted glass. The realization settled in. She wasn't just a visitor anymore. She was in the middle of something far bigger than she ever expected. And it was only just beginning. 2 hours after Director Lang's suspension, the Carter Sky Executive Building was no longer operating under business as usual. A quiet lockdown had been initiated. Access to key departments was limited. Staff were told it was a systems audit, a common enough excuse that wouldn't raise panic. But behind the scenes, William Carter had mobilized every high-level security asset in his reach. In a private surveillance suite 4 floors below ground, William stood beside Marcus in front of a massive wall of monitors. Emily and Karen sat nearby, eyes fixed on the looping camera feeds. The room was dimly lit, cool, and eerily silent apart from the clicking of controls and hum of machines. On screen, the various angles of the rooftop, hallways, maintenance rooms, and elevator landings played out in real time and from earlier that morning. There, Emily pointed suddenly. That's him. The image froze. On the screen was the fake technician walking casually down a lower maintenance corridor shortly before 7 o'clock. He passed through a camera blind spot, then re-emerged on another feed leading toward the elevator that would eventually take him up to the rooftop. Zoom in, William ordered. Marcus enhanced the footage. The man's face came into view, young, perhaps mid-30s, lean, focused, and calm. His movements were unhurried. He didn't appear to be sneaking or nervous. In fact, the quiet confidence in his stride made William's skin crawl. It was the walk of someone who belonged, or believed he did. Karen cross-referenced the image with the company's internal directory. No facial match in our system, she said. Not a current employee. Marcus stepped in. We've begun running the image through law enforcement databases. Nothing in the local or federal systems yet, but we've flagged it as urgent. William folded his arms. Rewind to when he entered the building. The footage rolled back. The man had entered through the East Service entrance, a rarely used staff access point that connected to the underground freight loading area. The gate should have required a biometric clearance. Pause, William said. Check who opened that door. Marcus pulled the log. There's no recorded unlock event, he said after a moment, frowning. The gate appears to have opened without triggering access logs. Meaning someone disabled the logging system, William muttered. From the inside. Marcus tapped a few keys. Only 5 people have the clearance to do that. Myself, Lang, and 3 IT directors. I've already spoken with the IT heads. They were all on a video call with our cybersecurity partners during that time, which is archived. Only Lang wasn't accounted for. William turned toward the screen. This guy wasn't acting alone. He knew the security schedule, blind spots, bypass codes. And Lang was the one who cleared the alert on his facial mismatch. Emily leaned forward. Can we check older badge scans? See if he used any other identity in the last few weeks? Karen nodded and initiated the search. Pulling all badge access records from the past month that used Lang's override clearance or originated from suspicious terminals. As she worked, William's phone buzzed. He answered immediately. Go. It was his private investigator, Paul Garnett, an ex-NSA contractor who had handled discrete background verifications and due diligence for Carter Sky for over a decade. I think I found something you'll want to see, Paul said without preamble. That face you sent, it's not in any official database, but I ran a deep search through old project security footage you asked me to archive years ago. Guess where he shows up? William straightened. Where? Project Skyvault. The prototype facility in Nevada. Footage from nearly 7 years ago. He wasn't a staff member, he was listed as a guest. Part of an external engineering firm hired during the early tests. William's expression darkened. That's impossible. We scrubbed those firms clean during the acquisition fallout. I know, Paul said. But here's the strange part, the guest badge he used then was registered under a pseudonym. And the name that signed him in? Let me guess. Brian Halper. William didn't reply for several seconds. That's not all, Paul continued. The engineering firm was dissolved less than 2 months after that footage. All the financial trails ended in shell companies. But the face, it's definitely him. 7 years ago, he was already inside Carter Sky facilities, operating under aliases. William lowered the phone slowly. His thoughts shifted from present danger to ghosts of the past. Emily was watching him carefully. Who's Brian Halper? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Marcus. Can we pull the footage from Sky Vault from 7 years ago? Security Room 2, between February and March? Marcus nodded. We have backups of all archived projects. Karen's screen pinged. I have another hit, she said. The cloned badge used this morning, it was generated from a master key database. That database was shut down after we transitioned to biometric only 2 years ago. It should be completely inactive. So how was it accessed? William asked. Karen hesitated. The only copy of that database was stored on a legacy drive. According to our internal asset records, it was destroyed. And who last had access to it? William asked. She tapped a few commands. The name appeared on screen. Brian Halper. Emily's eyes widened. Wait, but he's not part of the company. He was, William said. A long time ago. My partner. My co-founder. The silence that followed was absolute. William walked to the edge of the room, looking at the rows of servers through the glass wall. Brian and I built Carter Sky from the ground up. We were idealists, back then. Young, brilliant, arrogant. But Brian, he didn't want just success. He wanted control. When the company grew, we disagreed on everything: safety protocols, acquisition ethics, military contracts. Then came the fraud investigation. I bought out his shares during the scandal and erased his influence. I thought he left the country. But he didn't, Emily said quietly. He waited. And studied our systems from the outside, William added grimly. This attack wasn't just about killing me. It was a message. Karen looked up. What now? Now we find out who inside is still working for him, William said. And we shut this down before it spreads. The screen changed as new footage loaded, from Sky Vault, 7 years earlier. There he was, Brian Halper, younger but unmistakable, laughing as he walked a group of visiting engineers through the facility. Among them, the same man from this morning, wearing a different uniform but the same unreadable expression. William stared at the screen. A past mistake had come back to life. Emily looked at him, voice steady. So what's next? William's jaw tightened. We go deeper. The name Brian Halper echoed through William Carter's mind like the reactivation of an old warning alarm, not loud, but insistent and chilling. In the silence following Karen's revelation, the surveillance suite seemed to darken with memory. It had been 7 years since he'd last seen Halper's face, 7 years since he'd buried the past beneath court settlements, buyouts, and carefully curated silence. But the face on the screen made one thing irrefutably clear: the past wasn't buried, it had simply been waiting. William's voice was low but sharp when he finally spoke. Lock down all legacy servers. I want every system that was ever touched by Halper's team quarantined and scanned. No one moves code in or out until I say so. Marcus immediately moved to execute the order, issuing commands into his headset as the room buzzed with a renewed sense of urgency. Karen pulled up archive personnel files while Emily stood quietly, absorbing everything. William paced to the far end of the room, his hands clasped behind his back. When Brian and I started Carter Sky, it wasn't just a business. It was a revolution. We wanted to change air mobility, redefine private aviation. We wanted to democratize it, in theory. But the ambition outpaced the ethics. Emily asked softly, "What happened?" William turned toward her. He started hiding things. Shortcutting safety protocols, pushing for military contracts I never approved, manipulating investor reports. When I confronted him, he claimed it was pragmatism. That cutting corners was how the industry survived. I disagreed. We fought. I forced him out, bought his shares, made it clear he wasn't welcome in any future project. Was there an investigation? Yes. But he was clever. Most of what he did left just enough plausible deniability to avoid criminal prosecution. I had to cut him loose and bury the damage before it reached the board. It cost me millions and nearly wrecked our expansion plan. I thought he had disappeared. Emily's expression darkened. He didn't disappear. He waited. Karen interrupted gently. Sir, there's something else. William crossed to her terminal. On screen was a staff profile, old and grainy, pulled from the Skyvault archives. It's the man who sabotaged the helicopter, she said. 7 years ago, his name was registered as Neil Sutter, contracted through a temporary engineering firm Helper brought in during the Skyvault prototype phase. But here's the issue, Neil Sutter doesn't exist. The identity traces back to a dead man. The real Neil died 10 years before the footage was taken. Marcus whistled. So Helper built himself a ghost team. Karen nodded. And it gets worse. The fake Neil, the one from this morning? We caught a visual match at a Carter Sky subcontractor site in Brazil 4 months ago. He was on camera inspecting imported components at a third-party supplier. He's been active. William leaned in. Under whose approval was that inspection authorized? Karen checked. Director Lang. William exhaled. That confirms it. Lang wasn't just negligent. He was complicit. Helper's been feeding men into our ecosystem for years, quietly, in the shadows, through third parties and dormant contracts. Marcus stepped back in. I've activated forensic audits on all outgoing contracts initiated by Lang in the past 5 years. So far, 3 suspicious vendors have been flagged. All have overlapping shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands. William turned to Emily. This is bigger than sabotage. It's infiltration. Helper didn't just want revenge. He's been building a way back into Carter Sky, through our infrastructure. Emily's voice was calm, but focused. And if the helicopter had exploded, it would have been blamed on faulty parts, not sabotage. The narrative would have been, Carter Sky cuts corners, CEO dies, stock plummets. William nodded. Helper moves in to buy what's left at a fraction of the value. Karen looked sick. It's a hostile takeover, by assassination. Marcus's comms buzzed. He answered, listened briefly, then looked at William. Security just apprehended someone trying to access the old archive wing on sublevel 4. Guess who? Lang? William asked. Marcus nodded. He used a hidden elevator override and tried to erase archive project files. Bring him to conference room 0, William ordered. And this time, I want him under full lockdown. As Marcus left, William motioned for Emily and Rosa to follow him. They walked down a side corridor, taking a quieter path to avoid attention. William's mind was already 10 steps ahead. Lang's arrest would confirm what he already suspected. But he needed more than just obstruction. He needed a link, a real, irrefutable connection between Lang and Helper. As they reached the elevator, Emily asked, "What exactly did Skyvault do?" William pressed the call button, hesitating. "It was our most ambitious R&D effort. A sustainable, long-range hybrid rotorcraft designed for borderless air mobility. Think of it as a helicopter with jet range. Helper was obsessed with it, called it the future of warfare logistics. But I cancelled it once I found out he tried to license some of the tech to a private defense firm in Eastern Europe. Without board approval. So he stole tech," Emily said. "And then tried to sell it for weapons development. That was the final straw." Rosa had remained quiet until now, but suddenly she cleared her throat. "Mr. Carter. I have something." He turned to her, surprised. Rosa looked at Emily. "Your father kept a folder. Hidden behind a panel in our apartment. He never said what was in it, but he made me promise to keep it safe, even after he died. I never opened it. Emily looked stunned. Why didn't you ever tell me? I didn't want to drag you into that world, Rosa said softly. He worked here for such a short time. I thought it was behind us. William's gaze sharpened. Do you still have it? Rosa nodded. It's locked in a box under the floorboard. William turned immediately. We're going to your apartment. Now. Karen, secure a detail. 30 minutes later, inside a modest third-floor apartment on Chicago's west side, William stood in the center of a small living room as Rosa pulled back an old rug and lifted a wooden plank. Beneath it was a metal lockbox, wrapped in a plastic bag. Her hands trembled slightly as she passed it to Emily, who placed it on the coffee table and opened it. Inside were papers, old flash drives, and a stack of photos. William took the top sheet and frowned. It was an employee transfer form, Luis Rivera, reassigned from inventory to Secure Logistics for Project Skyvault. Emily grabbed a photo. It showed her father in a safety vest, standing beside none other than Brian Halper. Smiling. William sorted through the papers quickly. These files, they document unauthorized component shipments. Deliveries that bypassed the accounting department. Your father was documenting them. He knew Halper was stealing tech. Emily was shaking now. He was a whistleblower. He tried to expose it from the inside, William said. That's why he was reassigned, not downsized. He was being pushed out. Halper must have seen him as a threat. Rosa sat down, stunned. So the accident? Emily's voice was barely a whisper. You don't think it was an accident, do you? William's expression was grave. No. I don't. He held up one of the USB drives. If these files hold what I think they do, this might be the proof we need to bury Halper. Not just stop him, destroy him. Outside, sirens wailed distantly. Inside, the air had changed. The story of sabotage had become something else. A legacy of betrayal. A buried truth. And a daughter who had just inherited a fight she never asked for. Night had fallen over Chicago by the time William Carter's convoy returned from the Rivera apartment. The city glowed beneath them as the vehicles crossed the elevated expressway, but neither William nor Emily noticed. Both were silent, each lost in the implications of what they had just discovered. In Emily's lap sat a second flash drive from the hidden box, which they had not yet reviewed. William had the first already sent to his private tech analyst for immediate decryption. When they arrived at the Carter Sky Tower, the building's top levels were still under tight lockdown. Several executive offices had been cleared, their devices removed and analyzed. Director Lang had been placed in isolation in a sealed security suite pending official charges, and federal authorities were now being looped in under discrete terms. William led Emily and Rosa into a temporary residential suite built into the tower's executive wing, a rarely used apartment designed for visiting executives, now repurposed into a safe house. This is for your safety, William told them. Until we know exactly who Halper has in his pocket, I don't want either of you unprotected. Rosa seemed overwhelmed. We didn't ask for this. We just wanted to help. I know, William said. But your family is now tied to something much bigger. And your daughter, he turned to Emily. You've already changed the outcome of one attempted murder. That makes you a liability, and an asset. Emily's voice was quiet but firm. If Halper really had something to do with my dad's death. I want to see this through. William nodded. Then you'll need to be careful. From now on, assume you're being watched. Security personnel escorted Rosa to a guest room to rest while Emily remained behind with William. The apartment's central space had been repurposed into a small command center, with 2 laptops, a secure communications line, and the large screen already displaying updates from Marcus and Karen, who were continuing the internal investigation through the night. As William poured 2 glasses of water, Emily finally broke the silence. I always knew something didn't add up with my father. He left Carter Sky, and then just changed. He stopped building models with me. Stopped reading. He was afraid all the time. I thought it was money, stress. But now? William handed her the glass. He was carrying a secret. Probably one that scared him more than he could ever admit. Men like Halper don't just threaten livelihoods, they erase obstacles. Emily looked up. And now we're in his way. William's tone was cold. Good. Just then, a secure call came through from Paul Garnett, the private investigator. I've decrypted part of the drive, Paul said. And you're going to want to see this. William transferred the feed to the large screen. It showed a series of spreadsheets, delivery manifests, and encrypted communications. Paul highlighted one in particular, a message chain between two anonymous usernames, labeled only by timestamps and security tags. One of these aliases was Halper, Paul explained. We matched the writing style to archived emails. The other? We're 90% certain it belonged to Director Lang. Emily stepped closer. What were they talking about? Shipments. Payments. But this one, Paul zoomed in on a single message dated over 6 years ago. This one changes everything. It read, "The Rivera situation has been neutralized. He won't be a problem anymore." The words landed like a punch. Emily's face drained of color. They killed him. It wasn't an accident. Paul's voice was low. I'm sorry, Emily. Your father was targeted because he documented the missing tech. That folder your mother kept? That's what he was killed for. William's jaw clenched. Can we link that message to Halper directly? Not yet. But I've already sent the drive to a federal contact. The moment we have confirmation, we'll have enough to bring formal charges and open a federal investigation. William ended the call and turned to Emily, but she had already moved to the window, staring out at the city. He approached slowly. You have a choice now, he said. You can step back, let me and the authorities handle this, or you stay involved. But if you stay, you're stepping into a world where people like Halper don't play by rules. Emily turned to him. He made it personal when he took my father. I'm not backing down. William studied her for a long moment. There was something in her eyes, not recklessness, but clarity. Purpose. It reminded him of how he had once looked, years ago, when he still believed he could change an industry before it changed him. Then we move forward, he said. That night, William called an emergency internal briefing. Only a select group of executives were included, the ones who had passed background vetting in the last 72 hours. Marcus led the meeting with Karen, laying out what they knew so far, Halper's infiltration, Lang's complicity, and the emergence of a sleeper network seeded into Carter Sky's operational backbone. The conference room lights were dimmed as they reviewed the new evidence. William sat at the head of the table, with Emily at his right. No one questioned her presence anymore. She had earned her place. We're not just dealing with espionage, Marcus explained. We're dealing with long-term, high-level infiltration with the intent to destroy this company from the inside. Karen added, and Halper's not finished. The helicopter was just the beginning. He's still moving pieces. We've identified several dormant systems connected to offshore servers. He may have built a backdoor into our core infrastructure. William stood. Then we close it. No more passive defense. I want Halper found. I want his network exposed. And I want every lie he ever fed into this company ripped out by the root. The room echoed with silent agreement. After the meeting, as the others filed out, William turned to Emily. You were right about your father, he said. He tried to do the right thing. He just didn't have anyone backing him. Emily nodded, holding his gaze. He does now. For the first time in days, William allowed himself a faint, weary smile. Then let's finish what he started. At precisely 7:22 the next morning, just as the city skyline began to bathe in golden light, an envelope arrived at the Carter Sky Executive Tower. There was no return address, no courier record, and no surveillance footage of who had delivered it. It was waiting on the reception desk at the main lobby, propped upright as if someone had simply placed it there and walked away unnoticed. The receptionist handed it to Karen, who immediately saw the small, embossed seal on the back, not Carter Sky's branding, but something else. A barely visible spiral etched into the paper, familiar only to a few. Karen did not open it. She took the envelope straight to William's private office on the 38th floor. William stood at the large window, staring out over the city. He was dressed in a dark suit, no tie, his hair slightly disheveled from a sleepless night. Emily sat across from him at a smaller table, quietly reading through an archived document from the Skyvault project. Rosa was still asleep in the residential suite next door, under full security. Karen entered without knocking. "This was left downstairs," she said, holding out the envelope. William turned immediately, recognized the spiral, and felt a sick twist in his gut. He opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a single printed photo, grainy, but unmistakable. It showed Emily and Rosa sitting inside their apartment 3 nights ago. The angle was from a nearby rooftop, possibly through a high-powered lens. On the back of the photo were 5 words. "Don't forget who has more to lose." Emily looked up as William's hand tightened on the photo. He placed it on the table between them. She leaned in, reading the message, then stared at the image. This was taken before everything happened. Before the helicopter. Karen was already moving. "I'll lock down building surveillance, alert Marcus." "Too late," William said. "This wasn't a threat. It's a declaration. Halper wants us to know he's watching, and that we're vulnerable." Emily's face was pale but calm. "He's trying to push us off balance. He wants fear," William said. "That's his currency." At that moment, Marcus burst into the room with 2 agents. "We've got a breach," he said. "Small scale, contained, but very real." William turned sharply. "Where?" "Level 15. Secure storage room for archived contracts." The fire alarm was tripped remotely. "Our system auto-vented the room, flooding it with suppressant gas. Files were displaced, 1 drive missing." "What was on it?" Karen asked. "Old vendor records. Mostly internal documentation on subcontractors used during the early Skyvault phase." William's eyes narrowed. "Halper doesn't need that. Which means he stole it to erase something, or to mislead us." "I've locked down all physical archives," Marcus continued. "No one gets access without written clearance from me or Karen." "Good," William said. Then he turned to Emily. "We're moving you again." She stood. "Where?" "To the safest place I know." 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled into a private hangar at the edge of O'Hare Airport. Inside the hangar was not just aircraft, but a fortified command suite. William's personal control room, used during classified negotiations and off-grid operations. Here, the walls were steel, the access was biometric only, and there were no windows. Just information, technology, and control. Emily and Rosa were escorted to a private wing where they could rest. William entered the command suite alone, only to find Paul Garnett already inside, scanning the contents of the second USB drive they had recovered from Rosa's apartment. Paul looked up. "We have a pattern. Talk to me." Halper has been building a network for years. The drive maps out connections between a dozen shell companies, all feeding into a single structure, one that mirrors Carter Sky's operational chain. He's creating a shadow version of your company. Same model. Same logistics. Why? So he can replace you. Not just publicly, but functionally. He wants Carter Sky to collapse so he can rebuild it, with himself at the helm. William absorbed this, his mind already moving into strategy. "But the real punch is this," Paul said, bringing up a map. "He's planning something big. A public event. Large crowd, media coverage. And he's going to make it look like Carter Sky caused it. Another accident. this one even more catastrophic. When? William asked. Soon. Within 72 hours. That's why he sent the photo. He's trying to scare us into silence before it happens. William stepped back from the screen. His voice was steel. We don't go quiet. We go loud. I want every piece of evidence we have sent to the DOJ's Aviation Crimes Unit. Get them on the line. Then call in my legal team. Paul paused. You're going public? Not yet. But we're building the case. If Halper wants war, we're giving it to him. Back in the residential wing, Emily sat on the edge of her new bed, staring at her father's photo. Her mother rested nearby, exhausted. Emily's mind raced, about the documents, the sabotage, the camera trained on her old apartment. All of it connected to a man she'd never met. The door opened and William stepped in. He looked tired, but resolute. We're making progress, he said. We're building the case. But I need your help. She looked up. Me? What can I do? You know these files better than anyone. You know how your father organized them. If Halper's hiding something in the Skyvault archives, we need to find it before he moves again. We don't have much time. Emily nodded. I'm in. Together, they returned to the secure data lab where Paul had uploaded the remaining contents of the USB drives into an isolated server. Emily sat beside him, eyes scanning lines of data with surprising speed. After an hour, she paused. Here, she said. This isn't just about tech theft. Look at the insurance logs. Halper forged damage claims to Carter Sky's prototypes. He used them to secure payouts from third-party insurers. Paul zoomed in. That's fraud on a massive scale. And this serial number, Emily added, pointing. It matches one of the drone rotors tested in Nevada. The same one used in a private crash 2 years ago, a crash that killed 2 engineers. It was ruled pilot error. But the rotor wasn't supposed to be in that aircraft, William said. That drone was retired. It wasn't retired, Emily said. It was sold, secretly. Paul confirmed it. To a firm in Eastern Europe. William stared at the screen. Halper had killed before. And now he was planning to do it again, but on a scale the public wouldn't be able to ignore. And this time, Carter Sky's name would be burned into the headlines. The following morning began without sunlight. A thick, gray fog rolled over Chicago, casting a veil of quiet tension across the city. Inside the fortified Carter Sky Command Suite, the team was already at work before dawn. William had barely slept. Between legal consultations, encrypted communications with federal investigators, and preparations for a controlled leak to the press, he was operating on instinct and drive. But Emily had other plans. She had woken early, dressed quietly, and slipped out of the residential wing. 2 security agents attempted to stop her near the stairwell, but she flashed the provisional clearance card William had given her the night before. Technically, she wasn't authorized to roam alone, but she had made a decision. There was something nagging at her, something she couldn't shake. A memory, distant and incomplete, had been resurfacing ever since they found her father's documents. A name, a date, and a feeling. She needed answers, and she wasn't going to get them sitting in a security bubble. She took the elevator to sublevel 2, where old administrative files were stored, many untouched for years. The room was sterile, cold, lined with locked cabinets and wall-mounted archival terminals. She logged into the system using a generic research account Paul had discreetly set up for her. She typed in the name, Luis Rivera. Nothing came up under employee records beyond what they already knew, a short-term logistics assignment, a formal dismissal, no red flags. But then she tried something else. She searched the employee logs for cross-referenced entries. Instead of starting with her father's name, she searched for internal complaints filed within the final 3 months of his employment. The system returned 6 results. 5 were vague, low-level maintenance issues. The 6th was more interesting. Filed anonymously, Unauthorized testing activity observed on upper floor, involving rotor component not scheduled for calibration. Reported to supervisor but dismissed without review. It was dated 2 weeks before her father's departure. She accessed the employee logs from that date and scanned the shift roster. And there it was. Her father's name, but not in his usual department. Instead, he had been temporarily reassigned to Project Skyvault Engineering Bay C, which at the time was restricted access. Emily leaned back, heart racing. He had been there. In the heart of Skyvault. Not just handling logistics. He had seen something. She pulled a floor plan of the old facility and identified Engineering Bay C's camera feeds. The video archives were stored off-site, but metadata from the security rotation still existed. There was one camera in that bay that was disconnected for approximately 17 minutes, during the same window when the anonymous complaint was filed. A blackout. Tampering. She copied the data and sent it to Paul's secure channel. Then something unexpected happened. As she was backing out of the system, she accidentally opened a mirrored folder linked to her father's profile. It was auto-generated by the old HR platform, a kind of catch-all for flagged files, unverified documents, and unreviewed submissions. Most of it was junk, duplicate forms, unprocessed time cards. But one file stood out. A personnel request form. Date, April 19, 2018. Requested by Brian Halper. Subject, Luis Rivera. Position change requested, transfer to Prototype Flight Testing Division. Justification, mechanical intuition, low profile, trusted temperament. Emily stared at the screen, mouth slightly open. Halper had requested her father personally. She printed the form and tucked it into her pocket, then returned to the residential suite just as William was finishing a briefing with Karen and Marcus. He looked up sharply when she entered. "Where were you?" "I needed to see something," she said, stepping forward. "And I found this." She handed him the form. William read it, his expression tightening. "This can't be real. I checked the digital signature. It's legitimate. Halper requested my dad to join the flight test team." William's mind raced. "I never saw this. It must have been routed through the internal logistics department, bypassing executive approvals. Halper must have seen something in my dad. Maybe he thought he could manipulate him. Or maybe your father was planted there as part of Halper's scheme, but turned against him when he realized what was going on." Emily nodded slowly. "That's what I think. He was supposed to stay quiet, do as told. But he saw too much. Reported something. And then William filled in the rest. Halper had him silenced." Karen stepped forward. "We just got a hit from the DOJ's back end. One of the shell companies Halper used to funnel the misappropriated rotor designs? It's connected to a larger network, one flagged for international trafficking of military-grade aviation prototypes." Marcus added, "They've traced that network back to multiple Eastern European firms, some of which were on Carter Sky's restricted trade list." William's face hardened. "He's using Carter Sky's intellectual property to build black market aircraft. Possibly drones. Maybe worse." Karen's voice dropped. "And he's using your legacy to do it." Emily sat down slowly, overwhelmed but focused. "My father was more than a victim. He was at the heart of this. If we can prove that he resisted Halper, if we can recover whatever he documented, we might be able to prove intent." William nodded. "Then we find the last piece. Because I don't believe he stopped recording. If there's more, he would have hidden it somewhere no one else would look." A pause. Then Emily looked up sharply. "There's one place we haven't checked." "Where?" "My father's old model workshop." William looked confused. "You said you stopped building with him when he left Carter Sky." "I did. But the models stayed. All of them. He had a storage unit, small, private. I haven't been there in years." Within the hour, Emily and William were on the road in an unmarked SUV, heading to a quiet industrial district near the river. The storage facility was unremarkable, the kind of place rented by families or small businesses for forgotten furniture or extra tools. Unit 73 was at the far end of the row. Emily unlocked it with a key she had never thrown away. The metal door groaned open. Inside was a dusty but organized space. Dozens of model helicopters, planes, and drones lined the shelves. Manuals, schematics, and spare parts were meticulously labeled. But Emily went straight to the back wall, to a shelf that held a single helicopter model, sleek, black, identical to one of the Skyvault prototypes. She picked it up carefully. It felt heavier than it should. She flipped it over. There, sealed into the body, was a micro-SD slot. Her father's final safeguard. They returned to the command suite and inserted the card into a secure system. It contained video. A hidden recording, time-stamped 2 weeks before his death. The footage showed a private test bay. Halper stood with 2 unknown men beside an aircraft component that sparked unnaturally as it was powered on. Luis Rivera's voice could be heard quietly narrating in the background, out of sight. They're preparing something unstable. They've bypassed safety for power gain. I'm documenting this for protection. If anything happens to me, William Carter, you need to see this. Emily covered her mouth. William leaned forward. We have him. In that moment, the story shifted from revenge to reckoning. And Halper had no idea what was coming. William Carter watched the night cityscape shift and glow outside the command suite window, but his mind was inside, replays of that final recorded message looping in his head. The fragile recording from Luis Rivera had given them undeniable proof, but Halper's own words, actions, and followers had to be confronted directly. The urgency of stopping the next attack pressed on them both. Downstairs, in a secure interrogation chamber, Director Lang sat shackled to a sleek steel chair, under bright lights. His shoulders slumped. He had been stripped of rank. Security personnel surrounded him, guarded, watchful. The door swung open and William entered, Emily trailing close behind. Marcus and 2 agents remained near the back, observant. William closed the door quietly behind him. His voice was cold, measured. Lang. Lang's eyes flicked toward him. You have nothing on me. William slid the printed photo and Rivera's flash drive of the recorded footage onto the table. You cleared a facial scan override this morning, for a man you knew wasn't qualified to have access. Provide records of every outside contract you pushed through during your tenure. Lang's gaze flickered. That is, classified. You're the one accused, William said evenly. You empathize with your fate. He nodded at Emily, who leaned forward. We know you've been working with Halper. Lang exhaled, face twitching. It's not what you think. Oh? William leaned in. You activated a system override using your fingerprint, while you were not present at your office. You tried to delete archives. You routed components through shell companies. You allowed an impersonator inside the heliport access corridor without triggering alarms. There's only one way you could possibly not know what was going on. Lang clenched his jaw. Halper manipulated me. He promised to restore everything. The plan was always to return me to Carter Sky. William's jaw tightened. You served as his turnstile. You delivered the parts. You cleared the alerts. You made Carter Sky vulnerable. Now it was Lang who was silent. William rose and motioned to one of the agents. Lang was escorted out without a word. Emily remained in the room. She looked shaken. William stepped toward her. He lied, he said quietly. He volunteered. She nodded. But this doesn't stop Halper. No, he agreed. We have him vulnerable. We forced his vessel into the open. Now we bait him. They crafted their strategy over the next few hours. Halper's next move was likely to be dramatic, to shift public attention and strike when they least expected him. But Carter Sky would strike back, with proof. With planning. And with Emily at his side, representing a living symbol of his father's righteousness. William arranged a controlled press release, leaks indicating an internal audit, anonymous tips about falsified deals, quietly delivered to financial news agencies. That forced Halper's hand. He'd have to respond, and in doing so, expose himself further. Meanwhile, Emily and Rosa were moved to a more secure location, under discreet protection. The personal hit they received reminded William that Halper wouldn't hesitate. He doubled security around them and personally oversaw updates on surveillance. Days passed under tense calm. The city moved, midday honks and sirens beneath. Then, William received the call. "A package arrived," said Marcus. "For you." Unmarked. In William's office, he found a sleek black parcel. Inside was a single-flight glove, leather, high-end, personalized, and an activation code scrawled on a post-it, "Open the Skyvault gate." He stared at it. Outside, Emily stood behind him. They shared a glance that said everything. Halper's next move was now clearly announced. And it was the Skyvault facility, where his prototypes lay dormant. William turned to Marcus and Karen. "Skyvault is the trap. He wants us there." They deliberated. Skyvault itself was off-grid now, unused since the project's cancellation. It sat without personnel, but still held critical infrastructure. Perfect for ambush or spectacle. Emily squared her shoulders. "If he's going to make it happen, let's be there first." William nodded, then spoke into secure comms. "Plane to O'Hare Hangar. We move in 90 minutes. Bring only what we need. No suits. I want to be ready whether it's show or fight." High above the night sky, the private jet took off, its cabin dim, tense. In the seat beside William sat Emily and Karen. Marcus monitored feeds. As they ascended toward Nevada, William replayed the blade part that Rivera recorded, improper ignition bypass, hidden sequencer. Now the stakes were sky-high. They landed near Skyvault under moonlight. The air was cool and still. All lights were off. Carter Sky's security ground team ranged ahead, scanning for traps. William, Emily, and a small tactical unit entered the sealed facility. Their steps echoed through empty halls lit only by Monroe-tinted emergency lights. At the test bay door, the sound of rotors echoed faintly, as if a machine was humming alive. The note Emily found triggered it. They paused. Emily whispered, "He's here." Suddenly, a spotlight snapped on above the test platform. There, halogen glare captured Halper stepping into the light, smile cold, arms outstretched. Around him, familiar men in jumpsuits, reporters? Contractors? They were filming. "You should have stayed out of this, William," Halper's voice echoed. "But since you're here, welcome to my resurrection." William's hand tightened. Next to him, Emily watched, nostrils flaring, heart pounding. She clenched her fist. This was the moment to expose Halper's network, his crimes, his corruption. Cameras rolled. Halper raised a microphone. He began, but his expression wasn't confident. It was desperate under the glare. And as he spoke, live global news streams intercepted the feed, showing him admitting intention, naming names within Carter Sky. William signaled. Within seconds, tactical teams stormed forward, arresting Halper and his entourage. Simultaneously, Carter Sky's security streamed the entire confrontation live to every major network. The trap became Halper's downfall. Not with violence, but with exposure. At the finale, William stood beside Emily, holding her shoulder as Halper was led away in cuffs. The realization settled, the battle was far from over, but they had struck first, with truth, legacy, and courage. 3 days had passed since the Skyvault confrontation. Halper had been taken into federal custody, his network temporarily paralyzed by simultaneous raids triggered by the information Emily, William, and Paul had uncovered. The operation had been methodical, international in scale, and seemingly effective. But nothing in William Carter's world remained stable for long. Despite the victory, there was a strange silence. Too clean. Too sudden. Halper had surrendered with almost theatrical calm, smiling as he was handcuffed, uttering no resistance. The agents who processed him had flagged the unusual behavior: no legal pushback, no motion to suppress evidence, no bail request. As if he had expected this outcome. As if it were part of something bigger. William didn't trust it. Back at Carter Sky, while federal investigators combed through confiscated materials and forensic analysts decrypted every drive and file linked to Halper's shell companies, Emily found herself spending more time in the nerve center of the tower, not because she had to, but because she couldn't bear to sit idle. Every click, every report, every new email that crossed her screen pulled her deeper into the operation her father had once died for. Then, just before noon on a quiet Friday, it happened. Karen rushed into the executive suite with her phone raised. "You need to see this," she said, breathless. She turned the screen toward William and Emily. It was a live stream. A polished, high-definition broadcast. The setting was unmistakable: the launch stage of the upcoming Carter Sky Technology Expo, an event meant to reveal the company's next generation of sustainable rotorcraft systems. Except it wasn't supposed to happen until the following week. On the screen stood Brian Halper. Dressed in a tailored gray suit, clean-shaven, calm, and charismatic. The footage streamed live to thousands of viewers on the Carter Sky investor portal. Someone had hijacked the internal system. Worse, the stream wasn't coming from a known Carter Sky server. Halper stepped forward to a podium. "Good afternoon," he began, with a smooth smile. "Today marks the rebirth of aviation innovation, not from corporate corruption, but from truth." Emily stared at the screen, frozen. "That man is in federal custody," Karen whispered. William's voice was ice. "Apparently not." As Halper continued speaking, the view widened to reveal a small audience, hand-picked, likely unaware of the deeper context. Industry analysts, venture capitalists, mid-tier investors. All of them watching as Halper made a pitch that should have belonged to Carter Sky. "I present to you," Halper said, "the Helix Initiative, a reimagining of Skyvault technology, this time in the hands of people who believe in transparency and ethical flight." He gestured behind him. A sleek black rotorcraft descended slowly from an overhead rig, nearly identical to the Skyvault prototype, but rebranded with a new logo. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. Emily muttered, "He stole the design, rebranded it, and launched it under a new name." Karen was already typing. "I'm tracing the source of the stream. It's not in the States. He's broadcasting from a private island jurisdiction in the Caribbean. No extradition treaty." William clenched his jaw. That's how he got out. He had protection. The arrest was a diversion, just long enough for his people to move the launch offshore. On screen, Halper raised a hand to quiet the audience. "I was once a co-founder of Carter Sky," he said. "I helped build the systems you use today. And I was betrayed by those who feared change. Today, I reclaim that legacy, not with lawsuits, but with innovation." Emily stepped away from the screen and grabbed her tablet. "He's not just stealing tech. He's rewriting the narrative. He's making himself the hero." William turned to Karen. "Send a cease and desist. Get the legal team to issue an IP theft violation notice to every media channel airing this. And contact the DOJ. I want to know who signed the release order." Karen nodded and vanished into action. Back on the stream, Halper's speech continued. "To those who doubt me, ask yourselves, when did Carter Sky last build something that served the people instead of its shareholders?" The camera zoomed in on his face, perfectly lit, poised. "I know what's coming," he said softly. "And when it arrives, it won't be corporate giants that protect you. It will be us, those who built from the ground up, without fear." The screen cut to black. Emily turned slowly to William. "He's planning something else." William didn't need to ask what she meant. Halper's tone wasn't just marketing, it was coded. A warning. Minutes later, Paul Garnett's voice crackled over the secured call line. "I found the hole," he said. The federal handoff? It never happened. Halper was transferred to a private detention site run by a contracted firm. That firm was acquired by one of his shell companies 2 months ago. It was a staged arrest. They handed him over, filmed the process, and then flew him out. William slammed a fist on the desk. He used us. Let us think we won. Paul continued, but he didn't leave empty-handed. We believe he took one of the backup flight data processors from the Skyvault prototype room. The one we never located. Emily looked at William. If he has that, he can prove performance metrics, William said. He can show results before us. Claim we copied him. Karen returned. Legal notices are being ignored. News outlets are already reporting this as a disruptive startup built by a whistleblower. Emily spoke again. Then we don't wait. We move now. We go public. William hesitated. With what? With the real story, she said. My father's documents. The recordings. The sabotage attempt. We lay everything out, not as a press stunt, but as a full disclosure. William exhaled. If we do this, there's no coming back. No damage control. It'll be a media war. Then we fight it, Emily said. Not with helicopters. With truth. For the first time since the stream began, William's gaze softened. You sound like him, he said quietly. Then let's finish what he started, Emily replied. And outside, across the airwaves, the world was already choosing sides. The next 48 hours unfolded with a level of intensity William Carter hadn't faced in over a decade. News coverage of Brian Halper's sudden re-emergence as the face of a clean aviation revolution dominated every major network, each article echoing the narrative he had spent years preparing. He was no longer portrayed as a disgraced executive. He was now seen as a brilliant visionary wrongfully cast out by the very company he helped build. William watched it unfold with a bitter calm. But while Halper's image flashed across television panels and flooded social media streams, another campaign quietly took shape, one built on evidence, not spectacle. With Paul's help, and under Emily's persistent guidance, Carter Sky's legal and communications teams compiled the full body of incriminating material: the sabotage attempt on the helicopter, the recovered video logs from Luis Rivera, the falsified documents Halper had used to mask his backdoor dealings, the proof of shell companies funneling proprietary tech into overseas black markets, and, most damning of all, the original design files, time-stamped and watermarked from Carter Sky's secure archives. They packaged everything into a formal dossier, over 400 pages of documentation, videos, photos, and system logs, and submitted it to federal authorities, including the Department of Justice, the U.S. Patent Office, and the International Aviation Security Alliance. It was time to shift from defense to retaliation. And then they went public. In a live-streamed global press briefing, Carter Sky released a formal statement led not by William, but by Emily. She stood on the stage of the company's central auditorium, dressed in a simple navy blouse, her posture strong, her voice unwavering. William remained in the wings, watching. This was her moment, and the world needed to hear from someone uncorrupted, someone who had witnessed the cost of truth firsthand. My name is Emily Rivera, she began. My father, Luis Rivera, was a technician at Carter Sky. He died 7 years ago under what we were told were accidental circumstances. But what we've uncovered in recent weeks proves otherwise. The footage transitioned to the recovered video from Luis's model helicopter, his quiet voice narrating the illegal modifications being performed under Halper's direction. The image of Brian Halper, alive and directing unauthorized testing, filled the screen behind her. He died trying to expose this, Emily said. And for years, the truth was buried. The broadcast spanned 4 time zones. Journalists from aviation, finance, and tech industries tuned in as Emily walked them through the documented timeline, the sabotage of the helicopter, the forged component logs, the impersonation of Carter Sky staff, the ghost identities planted within the company. She ended with a single slide. Brian Halper's face, next to the Carter Sky logo he had once helped create. The man claiming to lead an aviation revolution, Emily said, built his empire by stealing from the very people he now claims to protect. And the man he stole from, my father, paid the ultimate price. The room fell silent. When she stepped down, reporters didn't rush the stage. They sat, stunned. William met her at the bottom of the steps. That, he said quietly, was exactly what the world needed to hear. Within hours, a flood of response followed. The DOJ launched an immediate investigation into Halper's escape from custody. A federal judge issued an injunction freezing the assets of Halper's Caribbean-based companies, and the International Aviation Authority suspended certification processes for any aircraft developed under the Helix initiative. Halper's response was swift, but far less confident than before. A pre-recorded video released through unofficial channels tried to paint the Carter Sky press conference as a smear campaign, orchestrated by a failing conglomerate desperate to salvage its name. But without supporting evidence, and now under federal scrutiny, his message rang hollow. The tide had turned. William stood at the top floor of Carter Sky headquarters, watching the sun rise over the lake. The building had never felt so still. But this stillness wasn't fear, it was resolution. The cancer that had infected his company had been named, exposed, and exiled. Paul entered the room quietly. Halper's offshore accounts are being frozen as we speak. The extradition will take longer, his island hosts are already negotiating. But it's not a matter of if. Just when. William nodded. And the prototype he unveiled? Shut down. The tech license was invalidated. The aircraft is grounded. Good. They both turned as Emily entered. She looked different now, not hardened, but sharpened. The weight of her father's legacy, her near-death experience, and her sudden role in one of the biggest corporate whistleblowing stories of the decade had changed her. But there was clarity in her eyes now. Purpose. Are you ready? William asked. She smiled faintly. I am. Rosa entered behind her, holding a document. We talked, she said, handing it to William. She's accepted your offer. The document was an official agreement, Carter Sky's full sponsorship of Emily's education in aerospace engineering, along with a seat in the company's Innovation Fellowship. But Emily had added a line at the bottom, a handwritten condition. No favors. No privileges. I earn my way. Like my father tried to. William read it, smiled, and signed. Deal. There were still more headlines to weather. Shareholder meetings. Legal fallout. Internal reorganization. But for the first time in weeks, William allowed himself to feel something other than vigilance. Hope. Later that day, Emily returned to the residential suite one last time. She sat by the window where she had first watched the city after stopping the helicopter sabotage. This time, she wasn't afraid. She pulled out a small photo of her father, one she'd kept since childhood, and placed it on the windowsill. I did it, Dad, she whispered. They heard you. And outside, in the world she had helped change, the winds were shifting. It was a bright spring morning in Denver, months after the public exposure of Halper's deception and the long cascade of legal and financial reckoning that followed. Though Brian Halper had not yet been extradited, his legal team had been mounting resistance on every jurisdictional technicality available. His reputation was in tatters. His companies had been dismantled, his financial assets frozen, and his collaborators scattered under federal investigation. What remained was reconstruction. Not only of Carter Sky's public image, but of its core, its identity, its direction, and its legacy. And at the center of this transformation stood two unlikely partners. William Carter, the seasoned magnate, and Emily Rivera, the daughter of a janitor and the late Luis Rivera, whose quiet courage had once been ignored by those who should have protected him. But now, that courage had shaped the future of flight. The new sustainable rotorcraft prototype, designed using core principles originally conceived in the early Skyvault initiative, had been redesigned from the ground up. This time, the development wasn't hidden in secured basements or tested in secret military hangars, it was built in daylight, collaboratively, with transparency. The project, nicknamed Aurora, had received widespread support following Emily's testimony. Carter Sky invited engineers, researchers, and young minds from around the country to contribute to its development. It was no longer just a corporate asset, it had become a symbol of ethical innovation. Today marked the maiden flight of Aurora's first public demonstration model. The hangar at Carter Sky's Colorado Innovation Campus buzzed with a different kind of energy. Not media spectacle. Not crisis response. But anticipation, the kind only possible when fear had been replaced by purpose. William stood beside the aircraft with a quiet smile, dressed not in a business suit, but in a light flight jacket. He watched as Emily walked across the tarmac toward him, holding a clipboard with final test data. "Pressure calibrations clean," she said. "Thermal range steady. Flight control AI passed the last simulation 3 times in a row." William accepted the clipboard but didn't look down at it. "Do you trust it?" Emily nodded. "I built half the system that runs it. If I didn't trust it, I wouldn't be standing here." He chuckled lightly. "That's not the only reason I asked." She looked at him. "You mean because last time you were about to get on a helicopter, I nearly tackled you to the ground?" "You saved my life," he said. "So I figured I'd better ask before I get in anything with rotors again." She smiled, a real smile, no longer weighed down by the burden of proving herself. Nearby, the Carter Sky team finished pre-checks. The aircraft gleamed in the sunlight, a sleek blend of carbon fiber, glass, and matte black plating. It was lighter, faster, and more efficient than anything Carter Sky had ever built. And more than that, it was safe. "Want to take it up?" William asked, holding out a flight headset. Emily hesitated, then took it. "Yeah," she said. "Let's fly." The interior of Aurora was smooth, near silent. Instrumentation was minimal, most of the control systems were integrated into a voice-assisted AI interface designed by Emily's development team. William took the co-pilot's seat as the cockpit canopy closed, filtering the sunlight to a warm amber hue. "All systems green," the AI announced. "Altitude clearance granted," came the control tower's voice. "Aurora 1, you are clear for vertical ascent." Emily's hands hovered over the controls. She didn't say anything. William turned toward her. "What's wrong?" She shook her head slightly. "Nothing. Just, a lot of moments led to this one." He nodded. "But none of them define it." She pressed the control pad. The rotor spun silently, almost invisibly, and the aircraft lifted off. Smooth. Controlled. Clean. They rose above the hangar, then the trees, then the skyline itself. Below them, the Carter Sky campus spread like a quiet monument to both failure and redemption. Mountains stood sentinel beyond the horizon. Emily guided the aircraft gently forward. William leaned back, watching the readout stabilize. "You know," he said, "I used to believe legacy was about what you built. What you left behind." She glanced at him. "But it's not," he continued. "It's who carries it forward." Emily didn't reply right away. She adjusted the altitude slightly, then engaged the autopilot sequence for stabilization. The aircraft leveled, hovering effortlessly over the vast green plains below. "This was my dad's dream," she said. "Not the flying. The integrity. He believed machines could be honest, even if people weren't." William looked out the window. "And now we're proving him right." They circled once over the facility, then began their descent. As they landed, applause erupted from the onlooking engineers, interns, and staff members gathered around the tarmac. The entire Aurora team was there, cheering not only for the technology, but for what it represented. When the cockpit opened, William and Emily stepped out together. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Carter. What does this flight represent for Carter Sky's future?" William looked at Emily, then turned to the crowd. "It means," he said, "we finally listened to the right voices." The crowd cheered. Later that afternoon, Emily stood alone at the hangar's edge. She held her father's old ID badge, the one Paul had recovered and returned to her. It was cracked, weathered, but intact. She placed it in a shadowbox display inside the engineering wing, under a plaque that read, Luis Rivera, Technician. Father. Whistleblower. Legacy. The world had already started to forget the chaos of the months before. New headlines moved quickly. But within Carter Sky, and within the life of one young woman who had once simply come to deliver her mother's lunch, everything had changed. From silent halls to flight decks. From whispers to declarations. From warnings shouted across rooftops to a future built with care, truth, and trust. And in that future, for the first time, they could fly without fear.